So one of the reasons I like working in After Effects is there's a few different things that it can do and animate in different ways. Similar in some ways to Flash in terms of using uh, um, paths that you can edit and move around. So if I, for instance, I've got a new composition here, I'm just going to create a new solid, and in that I'm just going to show just animating a basic path, which is pretty basic stuff really. Let's see, I just need to move my composition into there. So I'm just going to create a mask in here, and it's similar to the one that I created in Flash, and I can, with this mask, it works just the same as a Bezier curve in Flash did. I can key the path itself, move the timeline along. Let's have a look exactly how many minutes I've got there. It's quite a long, it's a very long animation that was going to be, so I'll just change that to 5 seconds, and I can just grab the path, double click on any of the points along the path, and I can move that. Let's just grab that there, and we'll get the movement in there. So this is why it's used for a lot of rotoscoping and things like that, and also and even sort of Flash style animation. Because for instance, if I was to do a leg or something, I could draw in a leg in here, just very basically. So I just draw this leg in there, and let's say I wanted to just bend it, key the path in there, and I'll select the points and just double click on there, and I can just move and bend, and then you get a sort of a level of movement. Obviously it scales at the same time, so it's not absolutely perfect. There's a lot of sort of changing to do that you'd have to do in order to make that work properly, but you get the general gist there of the way that could work if you were to try and do a character just using vector graphics and using Bezier curves and things. So you could bring in, for instance, some lines from Illustrator from a character similar to the one that I did with the king in a previous tutorial, and you could move and animate the vector lines and the Bezier curves around in order to be able to get this movement. So there's that one thing there. You can also, there's various layer styles you can apply effects. So you can add in something like a stroke in there. Let's have a look. Let's just increase the size, and the stroke will go with it as well. So it's pretty versatile for doing stuff like animating masks and things. So that's one aspect of the animation in After Effects. Another thing is to be able to put in is the hierarchy, and if I import in let me see, a couple of images. Let's have a look. I'm just going to import in an upper and lower arm. Let's bring these in, and I'm going to bring in the lower arm in there. Just going to double click on that, and the reason I'm going to do that is I want to move the pivot point up here. Okay, and go back to the composition. You can see the pivot points move to there. Just going to do the same with this one. Oh, I need to bring it to the timeline. Okay, so let's double click on that, move the pivot point to the shoulder, go back to the composition, and I can just create this really simple hierarchy. I'm just going to move that arm there. I'm going to go into the lower arm. I'm just going to move it underneath the upper arm, and I'm going to make the parent the upper arm. And that means that, again, I can just take the upper arm, I can transform the rotation in there. Let's just take it to there. I'm just going to transform, just do a rotate on it. And then I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to rotate this one as well. Do a little bit of motion. I'm going to straighten the arm and to there, and then give it some. This is going to be a really slow animation, so I'm going to move it to there and just focus in a bit. Let's have a look. I'll just pull that in. And so I'm going to have the arm straighten as the arm goes from being bent there, straighten. I'm just going to give it a bit of after secondary motion as it comes to a halt there, and swing it round. So it's a very simple animation there. It's pretty quick to do. Keyframes are easy to amend. You can just push them around left and right just on the time slider, and using a simple hierarchy, parenting the lower arm to the upper arm and then animating the upper arm, it'll therefore move the lower arm as well. So you can create this very simple hierarchy structure there, which is quite handy. The other thing you can do as well is you could bring an arm, a full arm in, and this is one of the really nice things about it. Let's just bring in the complete arm. Let's bring that in. And what we'll do is we can use the puppet tool. So I'm gonna got this arm selected. Again, I'm gonna double click on it. I'm gonna move the rotation pivot point up to the top there by the shoulder, and you'll see why shortly. And I'm going to select that, move it into position, and I'm going to use the pins, and I'm going to pin the shoulder, the elbow, and the hand. Now what this should do is it'll give me a mesh, because it converts the image, the file, into a mesh. And let's have a look. I can't see the options for it there for some reason. But there's a mesh here that is underlying this entire image, this particular section of arm that it's created. And what that's done is I've created these 3 pins, and these 3 pins will manipulate the underlying invisible mesh there. So I can then also move those pins individually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transform the arm itself with a rotation about the same length of rotation time as that one. Just going to move it around, and I'm also going to use those puppet pins in order to manipulate that arm. So as it moves around, I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to grab, what have we got? Puppet pin. Well, they've all got keys on. I'm going to use this one. I'm going to move this one back, and then when it gets there, I'm going to key it again, and then I'm just going to give it a bit of secondary motion, just have it move around. So you can see there, even with the puppet pins, it's pretty quick to set up. And I can also make things a little bit more rigid as well, because it's quite bendy there. So if I want to make this upper arm a little bit more rigid, I can also just hold on the puppet starch, not on the puppet tool, click on the puppet starch tool, and I can just click on it there, and you'll see that it's kind of create this grey patch in there, and I can increase the extent of this pin here, and what that does is it fixes the shape there, so it means it'll keep this rigid. I also want to create another one Let's create another one on the forearm here. And there again, you see it popped there. I'm going to increase the extent a little bit, well, a bit too far that time. And that means the upper and lower parts of the arm will become more rigid. Yeah, it's not absolutely perfect. I think this upper arm, the extent of the upper arm rigidity is probably a little bit too much. So what I'll do is I'm just going to see if I can go back to that, select it and just reduce the extent a bit, stop it from popping. So it's a really handy tool, and it also means that I can take this arm and I can just keyframe it, keyframe the arm as a whole and move it around. So I can take its position and I can move the position up and down, and it's very quick to set up. And it means if you've got all the limbs of the character, you've got the arms and legs, and if you're using the parenting system that I showed you just before, so you could parent this to the torso with another arm and another leg, you can very quickly build up a character and animate it and edit it pretty quickly using those functions. So that's the main crux of the kind of animation tools that you've got in After Effects. So I mean, personally I prefer using them because they're easy to set up. They're easy to amend and change, and you also have all the functions that you normally have in Photoshop in terms of editing the images themselves, putting different layer effects and things on, and so there's a whole range of sort of diverse range of things in there that you can use to help your animation animate in After Effects. Another thing that you can do as well is if I create a new composition, and I'm going to just call this mouth. So we've got our original composition there. I'm going to create this mouth composition, and I'm going to use that. Mouth that we had before, or the sort of something similar. So I'm going to create a new solid, and I'm just going to create this basic mouth shape. So, and I'm going to animate this. So if I take the mask, I'm going to key the mask, and I'm going to close the mouth shape here. So it opens and closes like that. So we've got our mouth all set up there. Now if I go back to comp 1, and if I have let's say, let's bring in the mouth into there. It's pretty big, so I'm going to scale it down. If I wanted to have a character talking, you can see if I just drop it in, if I just drop the mouth in on its own and just move the time slider, it will just like open and close as I've animated it. But if I hold down Control Alt and T, I can cause it a time remap, and what that means is I can use the time remap keys to open and close the mouth. So the mouth was fully closed there and fully open there, and it means that I can take keys here and just shift them around and open and close this mouth here. So again, I could parent that to a face potentially, and it means that I can also add connect it to things like expressions, so that it opens and closes depending on the volume that's going on in the scene as well. So there's a whole load of different things there that we can use in After Effects, and these are the basic animation tools in After Effects that we can use in order to get some pretty good results.